Never suggest that you do a knowledge cafe necessarily just for the sake of bringing people together to have a conversation. It should always start, like Kevin, it should always start with a business issue, with a business problem. And if you look back at some of my examples there, like Statoil with the merger, yes, the outcomes are a little ethereal, if you like. It's very difficult to pinpoint the outcomes. But you can imagine two large organisations coming together in a merger. I'm sure the senior managers are going to see the value of having conversations with each other, without necessarily the need for precisely documenting the outcomes. And the same with using it as a management training tool. Again, if you look at the way things are in the past, so with traditional lectures, you're not necessarily measuring outcomes there. So if you start with the business purpose in mind, often it's not too difficult to demonstrate the value. But the other thing I'll say about the cafe is that often the cafe works well as part of a larger process, that it's one part of it. One of the things that I used to find in my corporate life was that you'd have a lot of meetings. And people would go to those meetings, and often there would be two kind of mindsets within the people in the meeting. Some of them had already made up their minds what the decision should be from the meeting, and all they wanted to do was debate and argue and get their way, basically. And there would be others in the meeting who would want to explore the issue. They would say, well, look, I don't think we have enough information. Could we discuss this? Could we have some conversation around this? I think maybe there's a better way of doing this. And those who had already made up their minds as to what the result should be, would say, no, we've got to make a decision. We don't have time for that discussion. And so what I think often works nicely, and I've discovered now over the years, several organisations that do this, when it comes to some of those more difficult meetings, they break the meeting into two. The first meeting is effectively a knowledge cafe. The first meeting, or the first half of the meeting, they say, this part of the meeting isn't about making decisions, this is about exploring the topic, this is about understanding the topic, this is about having an open conversation to surface issues, surface problems, surface opportunities, better understand what we're doing. And, really anything goes in that conversation. Now, after whatever it is, an hour, 30 minutes, whatever time they decide, and say, right, now we'll stop there. That's, we can only talk so much about this. Now we've got to make a decision. So now they go into the second phase of the meeting, which is about making the decision. And that can be more about debate, and more about argument, and more about politics, and more about the way that often meetings are traditionally run. But at least now you've taken the time to stop and have that conversation and better understand the topic. And again, I think a lot of managers can see the value in that, because often, what happens with this intense focus on outcomes, yes, you get an outcome, you make a decision, but it's a bad decision, it's the wrong decision, or something has been totally missed, and some aspect of what's going on has been missed because the time hasn't been taken to fully understand the issue. Yeah? But I will agree with you, it's the biggest problem with the cafe, for a lot of managers, is the fact that there aren't necessarily hard outcomes from it. Okay?
Actually my question is quite tied to Donovan's question, because I'm also thinking about the Asian context. But I guess I'm thinking more specifically, is there value in the knowledge cafe with regard to pedagogical situations? What I mean by pedagogical is specifically things like, say, because you did mention things like university classes as well, when you're, say if it's conducting in a teacher-student setting, where there are certain, for lack of a better word, truths to convey, certain fundamentals and core ideas that has to be conveyed through a top-down kind of approach. Because of the organic sense of the cafe, I wonder if there's still value in using this format in the classroom so that some things can be taught and still at the same time still have that guiding philosophy of the organic culture. Yeah, I'm just wondering about it.
I mean, I think there's still a place for the lecture. I was just this morning, as I was putting together the slides for today, I was going to YouTube and looking at some of the talks there about lectures, and there was a gentleman, Australia, Sydney, a lecturer in Sydney, talking about education, and he was saying that the goal, the objective of a lecture was not to impart information, but a lecture, it's the worst way. Listening to somebody talk at you is actually, from what I gather from all the research, the actual worst way of actually learning anything. They're saying that it doesn't mean that lectures are worthless or pointless. What he was saying is that lectures are about engaging people and inspiring people, so that they should be short and to the point, and they should be engaging. And if you want to absorb information, either reading it or watching videos offline is a far better way of absorbing information than the traditional lecture. So I think you need both, but I think we're too, in our education and in our organisations, we lean far too much towards what I'm doing now, talking at people. There's not enough engagement, there's not enough interaction, there's not enough that organic conversation that we're talking about. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
David, thanks. So your classmate learning is more like community learning, right? But I'm more interested in learning for senior citizens. Do you think I will foresee any difficulty in Sierra using your concept of learning for senior citizens, knowing that the way they learn is very much different from younger people? Thank you.
I mean, I've got no direct experience of that, but I mean, I guess actually I'm almost a senior citizen these days. Yes, no, I must be. I try to deny it. I mean, I would love to, one of the things I haven't done is run knowledge cafes with children. I would love to run knowledge cafes with children. Again, this looks like it's starting to happen with the flipped teaching in schools. But also, as you say, with senior citizens, I think personally I think it's just a much more natural way of learning, a much less pressured way of learning. So, yeah.
Can you go back on slide? I found this gentleman's question. One more, sorry. And he didn't even pay me to say this. Your question was a great question. It's applicable in actually in any setting, because this is the answer to the question of outcomes. It's right. It is right here. The problem with this answer is that leaders and CEOs and directors aren't comfortable with this answer. Okay, but that's a different problem. It is a major problem. It is a major problem, but it's a different problem, because the result of a knowledge cafe is right there.
And those are outcomes.
Exactly. It also addresses the question about pedagogies. Deeper understanding, deeper insights, improved relationships. What organization, what leader, what CEO doesn't want these outcomes in their organization? So it depends on the purpose of the meeting, or knowledge cafe, or whatever words you want to use. So I think, and again, David didn't pay me. Well, I guess he did. I guess he did. I got some free beer, but it's important to understand that, and I'm sensitive to the whole Asian culture thing too. But it's really an international problem. But this is very important for the leader to understand that. And half the time, the leader doesn't understand this. And that's a different problem. Thank you.
I think just to summarize there, you can say to your leaders, if you don't want any of that, don't do cafes. Yeah, okay. Any last questions or thoughts before we start the campaign proper?
Dexter, my name is Dexter. I think maybe the solution to all this is to do it in two parts. The first part is to invite all CEO to your Knowledge Cafe first.
Yes.
And then the middle managers. So that may be a solution to all this.
No.
Because I think all of us in management is the reason that we hired so many staff reporting to us is that they're all necessary. And I think your main point is that they have, each and every person in the organization has knowledge. It is the unwillingness to share. So you are providing the technique to open that up. And if the CEO understands that, then they can understand. For example, I give you a very good example from my work. In fact, my question is that we are all living in a money world. Would your Knowledge Cafe be appropriate and applied to the social service sector? But I am not asking the question tonight, maybe another time. But the example I'm giving is that when I go to universities to recruit volunteers, if I ask them to come and help, out of 100, 2 or 3 may remain behind to say, how can I help? And then another occasion when I find the success rate is too low, I go with another format. My topic at the second visit is character equal money. Straight away find that there is more remaining behind to find out. But it is through this medium that I will get their interest. And then after I give them some benefit, then they would be willing to take the road. Because I'm a firm believer that all things cannot happen in one day.
Thanks, too. Thanks, sir. Thank you. Yes, and good advice. Maybe that's always the place to start for the Knowledge Cafe, is with the senior managers, because I think when they experience it, then they will get it. But let's move to the cafe itself. So I've settled out of the context. I've got a very simple question for you here. So I'm going to pose the question in a moment. What I would like you to do is to make sure at each of your tables you've got really 4 people. I know it might be difficult at times, and if you do go down to 3, that's fine. But 4 or 5 people per table, if possible. I'm going to pose the question. I'm going to give you 10 minutes or so for conversation, and then we'll change tables. I will wander around and listen in. If you want me to engage in the conversation, I will. If you don't, I will just listen in. There's still beer, there's still food if you want to go and partake. I think otherwise that's it. Okay? So, the question is essentially one question. It's almost in 2 parts. So, is conversation important? You've heard what I've had to say. Do you think it's important, or do you think I'm making a lot of fuss about nothing? And is it really too often overlooked in business, or do you think things as they are just about right? Just how important is the role of conversation in business? And if you think it's important, well, when you leave here this evening, what's the one thing that you might do when you get back to the office tomorrow that might just make a difference, you know, around conversation. Because it hasn't necessarily, you know, when we talk about getting more conversation going in a business context, it hasn't necessarily got to be, you know, a strictly knowledge cafe format. There are lots of other situations where conversation takes place in the organisation. So, you know, what do you think you can do in your own organisation to help improve that sharing of knowledge, that learning, you know, through conversation? Okay? In that case, so what I'd like now is just a few people from each table to move to another table, as simple as that, and continue the conversation. I'd like just a few people to change tables again, continue the conversation for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back together as a whole group. So, a few people change tables.